Zack Snyder, Star Wars, Attack of the Guardians of the Galaxy's Rogue Rebel Moon Awakens, this time for the last. Part 1 is finally here. Also known as Rebel Moon. Infamously started out as Snyder's rejected pitch to Disney as a potential Star Wars flick, one that would be more graphic and mature and younger and more powerful and tubular. So in a pretty baller move, he just erased some famous Star Wars things and put in his little OCs and changed some terminology. No, that's not a lightsaber, this is a lava sword, you idiot. That's no moon, dumbass, it's the Guardians of Gahul in 3D. And in a way, I kind of respect that move. I can't help but be intrigued by a director wanting to play with his Star Wars toys, even though the big kids wouldn't let him.
Lord help me, what?
You are beaten. It is useless to resist. Don't let yourself become destroyed as Watto did. Everything hurts, methinks. Oh, wait. Yusa gotta save me. What? Why did you say that name? All around me are familiar faces, worn out play. So how does Rebel Moon pan out? Bad, it's awful, it's booty. It probably should have stayed between Zachary and the toy box. It's like the antithesis to that brilliant binary sunset in A New Hope. What's regarded as this perfect sequence to communicate a sense of longing without any words. In comparison, Rebel Moon has like 8 different scenes of hilariously overdramatic slow-mo drowned out by the sounds of ancient lamentations for characters we don't know or give a shit about. There was this little movie that came out in 2009 that was called Monsters vs. Aliens, and I went to go see it as a kid in 3D. But see, we missed our showing, and the next one wasn't for another hour. So my dad was like, hey, let's go watch a bit of another movie to kill some time. And I said, Watchmen is playing. So I watched the first hour of Watchmen with my dad. I had to watch scenes of murder, atrocities, and sex crimes, shortly followed by Seth Rogen as a tomato blob and Colbert playing Axel F. And nothing since that night has quite encapsulated that jarring transition like watching a Snyderverse take on a Star Wars, where all the sense of fun, adventure, and whimsy is displaced to make room for graphic depictions of murder and assault and ball torture.
I guarantee you by morning, you're gonna be begging me for more.
Star Wars has typically managed to strike a balance between fairy tale-like wonder meets the militaristic. It's dipped its toes in being gritty and violent, but only relative to its own tone, if that makes sense. Anakin igniting his lightsaber in a room full of kids before we cut away, dismemberment and massacres and things like Rogue One and Andor, they tread a very fine line. There's a scene in Andor that supposedly was gonna have Aunt Petunia drop an F-bomb, and I'm really glad they didn't go with that. It would have felt too edgy to the point of feeling silly, and probably would have undermined a powerful moment in a really cheap way. Rebel Moon is what happens when you don't have that kind of restraint, and all caution is thrown out the window. Zack Snyder has commonly been referred to as a style over substance director, and this movie essentially has swallowed the key. This man is never escaping those allegations.
Blow that building up, this wall. We're just gonna blow some stuff up and hopefully that'll look cool. I'm Zack Snyder, and we're on the set of Rebel Moon.
You have some visually striking shots and landscapes, but they all kind of come across to me as royalty-free sci-fi backdrop stock footage. Rarely do the visuals communicate something about this world well beyond, well, it looks pretty. It's an unexciting, visually uninteresting Star Wars where people get grabbed by the balls and say stuff like, hey, bitch!
Hey, bitch!
Yay, boring edgelord Star Wars, inject that shit in my veins! So to set the scene, you guessed it, an evil galactic empire threatens to expand its reach in the stars, embarking on an imperialistic crusade to squash any rebellion and conquer all for the evil Emperor Zurg. You have Korra, a stoic brooding lady, a guy, who I refer to as a guy, and Charlie Hunnam as your main trio of the ensemble. So Korra and a guy reside in a peaceful farming settlement, essentially Whiterun in space. I can't help but wonder how much of this script actually ever was meant to be in a Star Wars movie or what was drafted after it became its own thing. Like, I like how the bald guy from House of Bards is like, I want each and every one of you to raw dog tonight. I don't know if I could see Star Wars doing that.
So make love tonight. Let's have some music. Some music to get us in the mood. No. Lower.
As for the main character, Korra, she really is just this bland character with really nothing to sink your teeth into. Like in the first few minutes we meet her, we get these big, vague, emotional monologues from her before we even really get a chance to connect with who she is, so it just falls flat and feels tiresome. Like for a very visual storyteller, there's not a lot of show don't tell. Get ready for a lot of brooding and crying with no sense of purpose. It's essentially a lot of good acting that just goes wasted. And then of course the Nazis from space show up, and don't worry, they mean no harm. They simply want to do a Bug's Life where the ants pick the food and the Nazis eat the food, but oh no, maybe Kevin Spacey isn't such a good guy! And thus the Empire begins occupying their land and will promise to return in greater numbers to ensure they get their crops. Oh no, if only we had some sort of warriors or samurai, you know, 7 of them? We get it, right? Star Wars was heavily influenced by The Hidden Fortress, and this is meant to be another sci-fi rendition of a Kurosawa work. And while Lucas has always been very open about that influence, it's one of many influences and ideas that come together to create something fantastical and mythical and exciting. Rebel Moon, in contrast, is like if Star Wars and Seven Samurai came together to become a terrible sci-fi original that happens to have some neat ideas for a fleeting second before going back to being the most bland shit you've ever seen. Speaking of, we meet the movie's little chappie, voiced by Sir Anthony Hopkins.
I am JC-1435 of the Mechanicus Militarum, Defender of the King.
We just meet him, and then one of the meatheads starts shooting at him without repercussions. Why the heck does this commander guy even let him do this? Aren't they supposed to be like, you know, like a proper regime? And the very next scene, Anthony Hopkins starts lore dumping to some girl we don't even know, and that's no exaggeration. We get this big, dull, pretentious, overblown moment, complete with a booming orchestral score. Oh, see, isn't it cute? The little Mormon robot got a little midsummer crown. I'm feeling so many emotions for these 2 characters I don't know! I also don't buy any of these villagers as meager farmers that can't handle their own. You have a bunch of able-bodied models straight from the CW that just look a little wet. At no point do you really feel or connect with their vague struggles or the toll their lifestyle might take. How do you do Seven Samurai but manage to completely evaporate any sense of desperation or urgency? And finally, we get our first big action scene where Korra tries to stop a Monsters vs. Aliens prologue from happening, and boom! We get all of our Snyderisms like slow-mo and pocket sand and slow-mo. I sure do love slow-mo. Alright, okay, alright, oh my god, as if this movie wasn't already slow enough. Then Anthony Hopkins, the robot, shows up to save the day last minute and he says, nope, I'm out of the shitty movie. You know what this movie's for? People who watch movies at 2 times speed or in little YouTube clips. In fact, I'm starting to realize maybe that's how Snyder movies got their insanely cultish following. Like you see clips of Man of Steel and like FXX at a Buffalo Wild Wings and you're probably quick to think, wow, this looks incredible, but you actually sit down and watch it front to back and it's an emotional flatline.
I was one of them. Daughter of a decorated commander.
So finally, Korra spills the beans to the dude on her backstory and who she is and how she had her little 4chan Nazi phase. And what I gotta ask is, why not open with this? Why not contextualize this universe a bit? You know, like a Star Wars actually would, or even like a Rogue One? Because revealing this origin over narration a third of the way in just ends up feeling out of place and disjointed. It falls completely on its ass because there was no intrigue surrounding this character or context to connect us to her or this world, the trees, the rocks. It all lands on its own ass because zero is done to build up to these big emotional reveals. They just happen. So ultimately, for the rest of the movie, you end up with a bland, brooding warrior who I guess used to be an ex-Nazi. Fantastic.
I'm only telling you this so you know who I am.
Yeah, that would have been great to hear an hour ago! Oh shit, this might be cool. Fast-paced action for the first time. This is so fucking ridiculous. Who you even shooting at, girl? They enter Mos Eisley Spaceport, where you get your typical showcase of all your sci-fi channel's face-off winners. And then this one alien starts harassing the dude, and yep, this is where he gets grabbed by the balls. This is the one shot where slow motion would actually meant something. You didn't do it. You blew it, Zachary. And it's here they meet Charlie Hunnam and immediately trust him to take them off-world to find a bunch of warriors. This isn't like Han Solo where they just need a ride from point A to point B. They just trust him immediately to join their entire cause and start an actual rebellion. And that's when this movie quickly devolves into a checklist of disjointed ideas Zack Snyder wrote in his little notepad. First guy is an enslaved warrior and he's got to tame a guardian of Ga'Hoole to be set free, but if he can't, they all get enslaved, which is like, that's pretty trusting of them to trust the guy they just met based on the trust of another guy they just met. It's like a Phantom Menace any percent speedrun, except there's no Qui-Gon and there's no point to actually why they would trust him. Again, you just have big moments that offer no actual emotional impact, just a dull visual audio journey. Say what you will about Avatar, but when Jake Sully tamed his Ga'Hoole with his ponytail, actually felt dangerous and like a real victory. Here, you're watching a guy we don't know tame this bird and this pretentious slog of a sequence with this bombastic choir. It's actually almost hilarious how overblown this dull scene is. Apparently there's a director's cut of Rebel Moon coming soon, which is like a veiled threat. Like, people keep saying the good version of the movie is down the line, but come on. I already see what you're putting down, I don't want more. Rebel Moon does nothing to dispel that myth that Snyder prioritizes moments he thinks looks cool rather than telling a compelling story. The way we segue from location to location to find different warriors in these big emotionally anemic scenes, a slow motion spectacle followed by these monologues to speedrun any actual characterization. Like watching this Jedi lady use lava swords to stop this Spider Queen who kidnaps children should be the coolest shit you've ever seen. But in motion, it's completely vapid. It's got some elements that suggest some expansive world and lore simply by packing a lot of concepts and characters into it that ultimately amount to nothing interesting or engaging. I like how every time they meet some new character, the rest of the group stands around idly like some silent party members in an old RPG.
Shepard.
Rex?
Shepard.
Rex?
And it almost pains me to say this, but even Suicide Squad had a better ensemble than this, because at least they had some kind of visible dynamic in some moments. Think of like Guardians, no, not that one. How quickly the movie is able to establish and introduce these characters, their motivations, and dynamic. I can tell you what each one's personality is and what they think of the other just off that first movie. Who the hell are these people? I don't know. So big reveal, Kevin Spacey and Charlie Hunnam aren't such good guy after all, huh? And he betrays the team just as they finally assemble, and for some odd reason, instead of finishing the job himself, he asks Guy, the guy, to be the one to kill Cora. Why?
You play your cards right, you at least might make it out of this alive.
The scene isn't even in slow-mo, but damn does it feel like it is. Let's break it down. Charlie, for some reason, gives this guy the little execution gun, which also works as a key that can unlock her restraints. Why would SS Oppenheimer let this happen? Especially after Charlie Hunnam had been hanging around with him for so long, why would he even risk that? And even if Charlie was loyal to the Empire, why would he himself hand the dude a gun/key in their most desperate hour? So obviously, stoic human male number 1 unlocks the restraints, slowly turns around and shoots Charlie's stupid little face. And while all these Nazis with guns are watching this happen in front of them, she's able to break out, beat down one of them, grab their laser, and then boom, havoc breaks loose for the big finale. And look, you know, I get it. I was a fat 12-year-old once with nothing better to do than maladaptive daydream about edgy sci-fi spectacles with big explosions and ships ramming into platforms and people shouting no! And big final standoffs between undercooked characters. I get it. But if that's the case, Rebel Moon should have just been a 10-minute short film. I actually really like this final showdown here. It reminds me a little bit of a much better sci-fi movie called Atlantis. It's a pretty fast and brutal fight where she's just popping his bones. Zack Snyder can direct a pretty epic fight scene when he wants to, with close-ups and slow-mo that actually feels impactful. What? So evil fake Cillian Murphy dies and the Empire drowns him in RGB tubes to send his soul to the Ice King. So the Ice King is mad that the rebels are now assembled, so he smashes the ice, and then we get a pretty funny closing shot with a warning of part 2, and then Boss Nass and Jar Jar team up with Jake Lloyd and Watto to stop Darth Vader, who's teamed up with other buff Darth Vader, and they fight while also Twisted Sister is there, and they're all like, sing a happy tune, Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. And then Darth Vader takes off his helmet, but you're gonna have to wait for the director's cut for that one, which will also be rated R. So this time Jake Lloyd can say things like, "Fuck Batman." And then buff Darth Vader says, "You will become me." But Jake Lloyd says, "I reject your future."
You sir did it, Annie.
You, sir, have saved the Star Wars. Me, sir, like this. I guess we really are the guardians of the galaxy.
End credits.